This video continues a series I'm doing on Star Wars CCG decks that combine both the Legacy era virtual cards, that's 2014 and before, and 2014 and after had what we call the reset. So the Star Wars CCG Players Committee made virtual cards. A description of why combining those two is a little bit odd is posted in the description of this video, so if you missed my first video, you can go back and watch the start of that or read it in the description below. But that said, we're going to dive right in with the first deck. Last video I had a dark side space deck and the light side space deck. It seems like most of the decks that I built in this format are space oriented. But this one's Federation space, so I tried to get the Federation capital ships, which you hardly ever see in a deck except for maybe the blockade flagship in the Invasion of Naboo decks. The starting location being the Death Star, with deploying a battleground site as you do with this starting interrupt. Then getting some bonus force generation at systems I control, being able to deploy weapons from my reserve deck and then forfeit them to my reserve deck, or I guess use pile, and then this one allows me to deploy systems. So the original key for this deck, and this was before we played Shields, was this card. So if opponent went first this game, retrieval and force when you play this interrupt. So we didn't have, my opponent really never played with grabbers, being able to grab an interrupt that was abused. So I probably had 6 copies of this card in the deck and just played it once a turn and just kept retrieving a force. And I'm able to do that because I started the Death Star as my starting location, which means light side goes first. So I think I'm down to 3 copies now, maybe 4. Okay. And this one's nice since it's an all-space deck. I put 2 copies of this one in there. You have to have 2 battleground systems occupied by that icon means Trade Federation starships, but my starfighters have a forfeit bonus, and then it's similar to cards like Search and Destroy, where you have to be in space, otherwise you have to lose force during every draw phase. That's an extra 1 force loss per turn, so I guess that's 1 per light side and dark side turn too. So trying to get them out of space and then do a little bit of damage with that while force draining. So then, big pile of Federation starships, some fighters. These guys are nice for deploying the laser cannons directly on them. Had 4 copies of those, just the basic droid starfighter. Then you got their guns, and it's expensive to fire 2 force, but you can have some pretty interesting outcomes. If you can, of course, hit somebody with it, but if Destiny plus 1 equals defense value, so their defense value is 5, and you draw 4, that makes them power 0, which is, in my opinion, much better than hitting them. But it's still nice to hit them, similar to the Yavin 4 deck that I had in the other video. If you hit them with Droid Starfighter laser cannons, they lose 2 force. So trying to force them to come up into space and then shoot them full of laser beams when they get up there is the idea. Of course, a great card if you're doing Starship weapons to make somebody's power 0. That'll hopefully blow them out of space, make them afraid to come back. And this is an interesting card here. I put 2 copies of it in here. So it's nice to make somebody hit, but the other function, if opponent's starfighter was just hit where your droid starfighter is present, activate up to 4 force. So since it's expensive to fire these Trade Federation weapons, that's not a bad card to have. Of course, you got to hit somebody in order to activate that force. This lets me get weapons out. And I got the Federation capital ships here. Pretty good when combined with a starfighter, otherwise not so hot. And it's hard to get them out. There's not a lot of support for these in terms, well, blockade support ship, but there's not a lot of support for these in terms of, cards that let you pull Star Destroyers. Those have existed for a while, but not so much these. But the control ship, having that and a droid starfighter at the same system, with a pilot on board adding a battle destiny, so hopefully drawing 2 battle destinies. These guys can deploy as a react. Expensive to fire, but if you hit somebody, they lose a force. And then, nice to have with your capital ships. It's a Destiny 6 Lost Interrupt, and these ships have pretty big armor, so especially the blockade flagship, 7 armor. Lost Interrupt to add 7 to your power isn't too bad. And then I got a few pilots in here, especially Nemodians for the Trade Federation ships, but you don't have to be a Trade Federation person to pilot it. And then this card to help me pull Forlom. He's the main one I want to pull because Forlom allows me to cycle cards out of my hand and then draw cards, so I can put high destiny cards back in my deck, and then hopefully find those ships a little bit easier. So I have 3 copies of Doubleback, and Doubleback lets you pull Forlom, Boba Fett, Dansborn, or Dengar, and I got all them in there too, so just as extra pilots. Or if I really wanted to, I suppose I could probably ambush somebody at a site, but it probably wouldn't turn out that well for me. And then systems to get out with the Kuat drive yards, and then just a couple more useful weapon-related interrupts. That's nice for drawing starships into my hand. I think I printed the virtual slips too small when I made those ones, but still functional. So just trying to get those ships into my hand since there's no way to go search for them. But if you draw Destiny, you can put a 5 back in your deck to get a Destiny 2 starship out of your deck and into your hand, so it's not a bad combo. So the main premise of this deck was just being able to retrieve force with that interrupt, but in the days of grabbers, this interrupt would be grabbed. Probably the first one to grab if the opponent knew what was coming. And by the way, after the reset, this was changed to opponent losing 1 force when you play this interrupt if their starting location was the Massassi Massassi Throne Room, which allows the light side to go first. So it's a totally different card now, but at least in this deck, it still has some function of allowing force retrieval. So the other one was Hidden Base N-1s. So that's the yellow and silver or chrome starfighters. So these first decks that I'm going over are all pretty heavy on starships and weapons. Not all the decks are like that, but it seems like a good share of them. I just really like starship weapons and trying to blow people out of space. It is Star Wars after all. So Hidden Base, the idea here, there's a system in here, I believe it's Naboo. For this deck, it doesn't have to be though. You can be whatever you want really, as long as it's also in your deck and you're trying to get your opponent to guess where your hidden base is, and as long as they don't know where it is, you have some pretty crazy bonuses that you get. So the opponent has to spend a force to draw a card. You can cancel 2 of their force drains a turn. So the longer you can keep them from finding your base, the easier it's going to be to really shut down the damage that they can do. And just slow them down in general, because it costs force to draw cards. So Walkling for a bonus force, this same effect again, superficial damage, and then this helps me get out systems even faster. Hidden Base lets you get out 1, and this lets you spend 2 force to get out another one. Then non-unique starfighters aren't so good, but deploys to Naboo fairly cheaply, power +1 at Naboo, and draws if unable to otherwise if you have 2 of them together. So quite a few of those starfighters in here, along with Proton Torpedoes, so the Episode 1 Proton Torpedoes, and then the similar effect to if you saw my first video of these. In fact, it's the same Admiral's Order, so trying to hit people with the torpedoes and make them lose 2 force for it. And then Naboo fighter pilots who, if you forfeit from a starfighter, the Naboo starfighter, they still have a pilot on board, plus they deploy for -2 at Naboo, so you can deploy them to Naboo, aboard a starfighter, and then activate 1 force. So you're basically deploying your starfighter and your pilot for free. I guess he's only forfeit +1 while piloting. So a few of those, and then some useful pilots. So this is a post-reset card. The set number that has a circle behind it means it's in the modern era of cards. So he adds Battle Destiny when piloting. He retrieves force when piloting. Those are the only 2 characters the only 2 that aren't Naboo pilots in the deck. Controlling space here by getting the opponent to lose 1 force, so similar to the card from the other deck. And of course, if you're going to hit somebody with a starfighter vehicle, you got to have this card so you can retrieve force if that's possible. This one wasn't in the dark side one. I'm not sure if it exists as a dark side form except for land, but being able to fire 2 torpedoes from separate ships and combining those destinies together might actually help you hit something big. Power pivot, of course, to make somebody power 0 or make their hit ship go lost. Adding to the destinies, taking torpedoes out of your deck. Some support ships here. Add to attrition. If the opponent's going to cloak with Darth Maul, you can put Obi-Wan in there. just a powerful card here. Power 6, ability 3 piloting. So if I could, I would try to get Luke or Poe on that one because it'd be immune to attrition, drawing 2 battle destinies, and a high forfeit. And then just ability 4, Naboo Starfighter. It's Anakin on there. But that's important for getting the effects out, and that's for tunnel vision. I have 3 copies of this in here because it's really important to get some cards out of my force pile. So you activate a bunch of force, you play tunnel vision, you go hunt one down. You got the systems, Naboo, of course, and then an extra effect on there, a grabber effect. Just in case my opponent's abusing any interrupts, I can play Strike Force on them to hopefully grab that interrupt, and each subsequent one they play has to go there. So grabbers are pretty common nowadays, but when you didn't play with shields, at least when we didn't play with shields, we didn't use them that much. But a couple similar decks, trying to overpower your opponent with Starship weapons. I know there's some people that really hate Starship weapons, so the first 4 decks I've shown might not be to their taste, but I'll have more videos coming of more decks. Thanks for watching, and I hope you tune in for another deck video that's coming up. The next one's going to be Senate and bombing runs. So that one should be pretty good if you're looking for something a little bit different from what I have here. Thanks again. See you next time.